Hi there. In this video, we are going to see how we can implement Google Calendar Event API in our .NET Web API project. Before starting the video, I would like to suggest you to watch the video completely for better understanding. Since we are going to do everything from scratch, so the video is going to be a bit lengthy. So without getting delayed, let's get started. The main agenda of this video is to implement Google Calendar Event API, in which we will create the event, get a single event, list all events, update event and delete event. As a bonus, we will be creating event with Google Meet. So the steps which we are going to follow is we need to register our application in Google Cloud Console. Then we will be getting the client ID and the client secret, and we will create web API project. Then we will authorize the user. Then we'll get the token, and using the token we will be accessing the APIs. Let's jump into the Google Cloud Console to register our application now. console.cloud.google.com. So if you are new to the Google Cloud Console, you will be getting this type of interface. Since we are new, we don't have any project created. So we have to create a project. If you already have project, you can use that project and you can go inside the API and services. Since I don't have one, so it will ask me to create one. So I'll create a project first. I will name the project as Google Calendar Event API and create. So it's under progress. Once it is created, it will be selected by default. Now the project is created and we can see in the left side we have enabled API and services, library, credentials, auth consent screen and page users agreements. So in order to get our client ID and the client secret, we need to configure our auth consent screen. So if it is already created, you can go to the credentials. You can click on create credentials and click on auth client ID. Since we haven't configured our consent screen, it is asking us to configure the consent screens. So let's go and configure the consent screen. Here it is asking us what type of user we are trying to target. Either that's an internal user or the external users. Internal users are the users within the organization and we don't have to submit our application for the verification. For the external user, it will be available for any test user with the Google account only, and we can start in testing mode and will be available to the users that are added in the list of test users. So once it is ready for the publishing, we need to submit it for the verification. So we will select the external user and create. Here it is asking us the application name, so we'll give the same name again. User support email, I'll give my email ID, and we need to fill all these details before submitting it for the verification so that it will be available for our external users. Here developer contact email, I'll give my email ID, themessydeveloper@gmail.com. Save and continue. Now we need to add the scope. So how we can get the scope? Let's search for the Google Calendar Event API. Go to the first link. And if we go to the insert event and I scroll a bit down, then we can see the scopes required. So here we have two scopes. googleapis.com/auth/calendar, googleapis.com/auth/calendar.events. Since calendar is a complete calendar and we can perform all sort of actions on the calendar, but event is a subset of that. So we will be selecting events for now. We will copy this scope and try searching here. Add or remove new scopes, search by scope and paste. Here we are not able to see the scope. Why? Because Google Calendar API is not enabled. So for that, we will go to the enabled API and services. Click on enable API and services. If we scroll a bit down, we will see Google Calendar API. Click on it. Now just click on enable. Many of us are having the doubt that if it is free or paid. So it is totally free. We can use it in our application. So once it is enabled, you will be landing on this page. You can see the matrices here. Now again go back to the consent page. Edit the app. Save and continue. Add or remove scope. Again, if we try searching the scope, Now here we can see we have those scopes available to us. Click on it, select, update. Now we can see the scope is added here. So that is auth/calendar.events. What it will do is view and edit events on all your calendars. Save and continue. Now this is the test user. If you remember, at the time of configuring, it asked us either we want for the internal users or the external users. So for the external user, it was like it will be available for users with Google account who are listed under test users. So I'll add mine. Multiple developer and QA are working on this, then we'll have to add them as a test user so that it will be available for them also for the testing. Save and continue. Now it is all set. Go back to dashboard. Now we are done with the OAuth consent screen. Go to the credentials now. Create credentials. OAuth client ID. Select the application type as web app. We have to give the name of the application. So give the name and in the redirect URL. So what should be the redirect URL? For the development, we will be creating an application first. Let's create a web API project. So we'll select ASP.NET Core Web API and currently I'm using .NET 8. Click on next. Give the name to the project. We'll leave everything as it is. Click on create. Now our application is ready. Let's run. We can see on what port it is running. So we'll copy this URL and paste it here as a redirect URL. And also we'll create a controller named as OAuth controller and we'll create a action called callback. So why we are creating is a post authentication. The authorization server will return us the code. Using that code, we will be generating the token. So that will come as a part of creating this controller. So for now, let's create. Now our client ID and client secret are generated. So copy and let's paste it in the app settings so that we can use it. We needed the scope redirect URL. We can simply copy from here /auth/callback. Now the scope which we have copied, let's copy the scope as well and paste it here. If we have multiple scope, we can add all using space. Based on requirement, your scope value will change and the redirect URL you can change. So let's go and create a OAuth controller first. We'll be creating a MVC controller. Let's go create MVC controller. MVC controller, empty controller, add, and we'll name it as OAuth controller. Inside this, we'll have first authorized endpoint. It will simply return us to authorization endpoint, and other call will be for callback, and it will accept the code. Also the state if there is any. For now, we will not implement it. So to return to the authorize API endpoint, let's go and find the authorized endpoint. So we'll search for Google auth token endpoint. So let's go to server side web apps. If you scroll down, you will be able to see the language specific requirements. If you scroll a bit more down, you will be able to see the authorization server supports. These are the parameters which are supported. Let's go to the HTTP client. Here we will see this is the authorization server endpoint. One more thing, we can get the same from the OpenID configuration. So if you see Google authorization server is based on OpenID Connect, so we can get the OpenID configuration from here as well. So we will just copy the base URL slash dot well-known slash OpenID configuration. Then you will be able to see all those data like the issuer, the authorization endpoint. This is the authorization endpoint which is given here. And we have the device authorization endpoint, token endpoint, user info endpoint, and revocation endpoint and all. So we'll just copy this first and go to the code. Here we needed to redirect to the same URL. So let's create it as a different variable. Now we need scope. So we already have defined the scope in our app settings file. So let's go and get it from there. So we'll just inject the I configuration, access type. Here the main requirement of access type offline is if we are not using this parameter, we won't be getting the refresh token. So if we are using this parameter, we will get the refresh token at the time of requesting the token. So this is the one. Let's add ampersand because it's a query parameter. This is question mark. This is fine. Now next is include granted. We don't need it. Response type as code. There is state. So let's keep some state value. Then let's keep the redirect URI, and we already have this in our app settings file. So we'll get using I configuration, and last we have the client ID, and this also we have in our app settings files. And we will redirect to this URL. So this is done. Now, once we navigate any user to the authorized URL, we'll provide the consent and then it will return us to our redirect URL with the code. Now using this code, we have to generate the token. Since this is MVC controller, we have to map the route. So let's map the route first. Controller route. Done. Now, if we run the application, we'll be able to see. Before that, let's create two of the folders, one for the services, other for the models. So inside models, let's create a token class. I have already created a token class, so I'll just copy paste from there. Okay, so how will I get the token class? So if you go back to the documentation, here, if you see post authorization, if it is successful, we will be getting these fields: access token, expires in, refresh token, scope, and token type. So let's create the same. Access token expires in, token type, scope, and refresh token. I have created one more property for generated on, and we'll create one more property for if the token is expire. So it's like access token which we will get will expire after the second which are mentioned in the expired in. So we are just at the time of generating the token, we are capturing the generated on value so that we can check if the token is expired or not. If the token is expired, in that case, we'll have to refresh the token. So let's assign the value for the generated on in the constructor so that every time the object is created, the generated on value will be assigned. So token class is done. Let's go to the services. We'll create an interface for iToken service. In this, we'll be creating few methods. One to get the token from the code. Another is getting the access token, and the other method will be refreshing the token from the access token. First, let's create a method for getting token from the code. So we'll make all the call as async call, get token async, and this would be the code. And after that, we'll just make it as string. We needed access token. So this is done. Now what we will do is the refreshing of token we will create in the service, because we don't want to expose refreshing the token outside this service. So create the token service and we'll implement the iToken service here. Implement all the interface methods. Now we will use a REST sub library to interact with the API calls. So let's inject iREST client from the REST sharp. Since it is not installed, let's install one. It is installed. Now you can see the package version is 112.10. Now let's create the object REST client. Instead of injecting, we'll do simple creating the object directly. We'll pass the base URL for the token. You can get directly from here also the token URL. So let's copy this, paste it here. Now our REST client object creation is done. First we will generate the token, and before that let's create a file for saving the token. Since in the real time you will be storing the tokens in the database, but here since I'm not interacting with the database, so I'll be creating a file and I'll be storing the data in that file itself, token.json. And this is done. We'll copy the path of this file, copy file path, token file path. Now we will have two private methods, one to save the tokens in the file and other is to get the token from the file. Save token, and in this we will be passing a parameter called token, and other method will be to get token saved in the file. So we'll use the file to read and write. Read all text from the token file path, and we will convert to the token first. Okay, now let's return directly instead of again storing in the variable. JSON serializer dot deserialize in token format the token content, and done. Now we have to save the value, so we'll do the same. System.io.file dot write all lines. Let's write all text, and then we'll file the path, token path, and JSON serializer dot serialize object token, and this is done. Now we need to get the token. So from the code we have to get the token. So if you see the request which we are making to get the token, if we scroll a bit down, here is the token call. We have to make the post request, and these are the parameter we need to pass. Let's create object of the REST request. So basically to make any of the call via REST client, we have to pass the object of the REST request if there are additional parameters, request body and all. So we'll just create object for that. Goes to new REST request. Now in the REST request, so all these parameters are in the query parameter. So we'll add the query parameter, add query parameter. So let's copy each of these code. REST request dot add query parameter. Now the client value we have in our configuration, so we'll have to inject our I configuration again. To the app settings, the client ID, same is for the client secret, the redirect URL and the grant type. Redirect URL, grant type. The grant type value is already defined, that is authorization code we are passing. So it is authorization code. The redirect URL, the client secret, and we already have the client ID. So this is the query parameter we have to pass. Now let's make the post call. Test client dot post async will pass the type in which the response can be converted. So that's it. So our response will be the token, and we will make it as await and return the response, and done. This is about generating the token. Now we have to refresh the token also. So let's go for refreshing the token. If you scroll a bit more, you will get the call for refreshing the token as well. Refreshing the token offline access. So here we have these parameters: client ID, client secret, the refresh token, and the grant type. And it is again the post call to the same API endpoint. So we can copy this code here and paste it directly here. Now we needed the client ID, client secret, which we already have. The refresh token, instead of this we'll paste this, and we have to pass the refresh token. Now how will we get the refresh token? So we can request the token. We already have a method for that, get token. Now we can use token dot refresh token here. So we got refresh token, client ID, client secret, and the grant type we needed. Grant type we already have one, and we don't need this, and it is done. Sorry, this is not for the getting the access token, it is for refreshing the token. So we will create a private method for refreshing the token. Refresh token async, and done. Now to get the token, so before returning the token we have to check if the token is valid or not. So we will get the token saved in our database. For here we have saved our token in the file, so we'll get the token. Now we'll check if the token is valid or not. Token dot is token expired. If it is expired, what we will do is we will refresh the token. Await this dot refresh token async, and then we'll return the token. So we have to return the access token from here. Now this is it. We have got all this. So we'll go to our controller and see if we can get the access token. So we just get rid of all these default models, and the controller will change the name of this controller. Google Event API controller. This is done. We'll just remove this. We'll remove this as well, this as well, and we'll go and inject our iToken service. We need to register our services. Add scoped iToken service with token service, and done. Now we will be able to inject it here. So I hope you understood why am I creating the token service. My token service is fully responsible for saving the access token, getting the token from the code, and refreshing the token if it is invalid. So you can do the same in your code based on your requirement. Done. Let's get the token. So should we get token or we should get get token string, we will have to get the access token. So string get access token, and we just have to return this dot token service dot get token async, and we'll have to await this method, and done. Now if we run the application, it should able to authorize. Before authorizing only, if we try to make the call to this token call, it will throw exception, because here if we are getting it right, token will be null and is expired will throw the exception. And even if we are adding null check here, it will get the exception again. So we'll first authorize and then we'll see. Let's skip a debugger here so that we can see how is the flow going. We will add a debugger here first and again in the callback. Okay, we haven't implemented the callback yet, so let's implement the callback here. Here also we'll have to inject the iToken service. Same goes for this. Now we just have to call the method this dot token service dot get token async and pass the code value. Done. We'll have to make this await. So await and make the call as async, and that's all. It is done. We'll add the debugger here as well, and let's try running the application and see if the token is being generated or not. For now, if we see, our token.json file is empty. Let's try running the application. Okay, home could not be resolved in register. Okay, here it should be equal. Now let's try running again. Now it is running. So let's go to the auth/authorize. Okay, there is some typos. We'll just copy it here. Now let's stop and run the application again. It should be auth/authorize. Now if you see the URL, we have got the URL as google.com/o/auth2/v2 auth, and scope we have, yes, calendar.events, yeah, access type offline. Here we have missed ampersand. Okay, and after that we have missed the ampersand in all the places, so it won't work. So let's add the ampersand first. Okay, now let's run it again. It should work fine now. Now if you see the URL, the URL looks good. So let's continue. So it asks me to choose your account, so I'll be choosing my account. Now it shows that my application is not verified. Since we have created our application for the external users, the application need to be verified. I am added as a test user, so it is showing me this page. So I'll just click on continue, that I trust the developer. And here we can see this is our application name, which we have configured in our consent screen. This is the one place, this is the other place where we have our application name, and this is the third place we have the application name. And here we will be able to see the list of all the scopes which we have requested for. Let's click on continue, and there we go. So if you see, we have the code value and we have the state value. State value, the Messi developer, it is same. State value is just to verify that the request has not been altered and during the process of authorization. And then if we try debugging it, it will go inside this, and we are making call to the token endpoint, and we have got the token now. Since we have got the token, but we are not storing it anywhere, but we need to store this. So let's go and we store this first, this dot save token, and we'll pass the response, and done. We'll run this line again so that the tokens are saved. Now we'll return it, and this is done. So if you go back to the Swagger again and get the tokens, so we'll be able to see our token now. Here we go. So this is the token. And again, if you go to our token.json file, we will have the data there now. And let's see. So here we can see generated on, which we have kept, and is token expired is false. We have our access token, we have expire scene, we have response type, we have scope, we have the refresh token. One thing to be noted is the refresh token which is being generated, it will be generated only for the first request. The second time, if you are trying to refresh the token also, it won't return the refresh token. You have to use the same token again and again. So at the time of refreshing token, we'll have to take care of that case. So we have got the token, and again we need to store this. So let's make the call to save token, pass the response, but before this we have to update the token value as well. Response dot refresh token equals to tokens refresh token, and that's it. So this will now fix the issue that once the token is generated, we need to preserve it, because the next time you are refreshing the token endpoint doesn't return the refresh token. But you may come across an issue that once you have generated the token and you forgot to preserve the refresh token. In that case, what you can do is you can go to your account, you can go to the security section, you will be able to see the third party integrations. From there, you will just find that application and remove the access. In that case, the tokens will be revoked. And now if you come and integrate again, the new refresh token will be generated for you. So our token generation part is complete and this will work fine. Now let's go to our meeting generation part. We'll create a service now. So let's go to the services, iMeeting service. We'll create an interface called iMeeting service. And for that, we'll have to create a model. First, let's go to the documentation and see what things we needed. So the very first method we will do is we'll create a event, and if you go to the documentation, there we have the request body. In the request body, we need to supply event resource, and these are all the properties required. But if you see, only required properties are end and the start, which is nested object. So if you go to the end and start, you will be able to see here we have end date and date time and time zone. When to use the date and when to use the date time. If the event is for the complete date, we'll just provide the date. If the event is for certain duration, we'll provide the date time, start and end date time, and the time zone will have to provide. Now, the other properties we have is the summary. This is the summary, and we have the description as well. So we can use the description. So we'll have to create model for this, but I have already created just to save the time. So I'll just copy that. I'll create a class named as event request. So let's go create a class for event resource. We'll create a event resource and we'll create all the classes here. But in your case, you'll have to make sure that you create separate files for the separate classes so that it will be more readable. For the video purpose, I'm just creating it in the sort. I'll copy all the classes which are required and we'll come and paste it here. Here we can see we have two models. One is for event request and another model we have the event response. So most of the properties are same, but few of the properties are there in the event response which are extra. If you see, we have few of the properties already assigned for this. Why? Because these are the selection properties. If you come and check in the documentation, search for the event type, yeah, you can see these are the possible values for them. So we have to assign values for these properties. So for the properties which are having the possible values, we have to assign the default values for them. So I have assigned those values. If you are not assigning it, you will be getting the bad request every time. So this is my model for event request, and you can see all the properties I have copied from there. This is the event response. This is same as the one which is provided here, event resource. You can see each and every property you can find, and all of them I have made nullable. Why? Because I don't want to provide all these property at the time of creating the event. So all the properties I have already created. Now let's go and create meeting service. We'll have methods for that. Event response, get meeting, get event by id, and we will pass the id, event id. Then we will create event, event request will pass, get event by async. Then we'll try getting all the events. Get events async, then delete. While deleting, we just needed the event id, and then we have the update. Okay, from where I'm getting all this is I have already seen the documentation. I have already gone through the documentation. So I know what are the parameters required and what are those. But yeah, we'll go through the documentation once we are writing the code. So I'll just create the service again, which is meeting service. Okay, it's not a meeting, it's an event service. So let's rename it as event service. And let's create a service for that. And implement all the methods. This is done. Now we'll again use the REST hub for making the calls. I REST client, create constructor, inject the I REST. Okay, let's create object for the REST client, and we will pass the base URL. Now the main thing is let's create a event first. So we'll go to the documentation now. Here is the insert call, and it is the base URL. So I'll just copy it and paste it here. So this is my base URL. Now we have to make the post request, and we have the path parameter as calendar ID, and you can see calendar is a calendar identifier. So if you have multiple calendars, you can create event in any of the calendar. But if you want to access the primary calendar of the current user, so you can use the primary keyword. So we will use the primary keyword, and we'll create the object for the REST request again. REST request equals to new REST request, and we'll pass the path parameter again slash events. Now this is our request. Now these are the optional query parameters. If you want, we can use them. So this is the conference data. Maximum attend is send notification, which is deprecated. Instead of that, we have to use send updates. So in this, we have the options as all, external only, none. And this is the scope. So we already have the scope properly done, and we already have all this property in our model. So let's add the model to our REST request. REST request dot add JSON body, and we'll pass the event request, and this is done. Now one more thing is we needed the token. So let's inject our token service, private read only I token service, token service. So our token service is injected. In this we have to add the header. If we scroll a bit up, it require authorization. So if you are making call to any of the endpoints, you have to pass the authorization parameter in the header, and whose value will be like bearer space and the access token value. So add header, which is authorization, and its value will be bearer space the access token value. So let's get the token. So it will return me the token. Better name it as access token, it will be easy to read. We have added this. Now we'll have to make the request. So where response equals to await this dot rest client dot post hashing, because we have to make the post call and I want to map it to my event response. So event response, and I'll pass the rest request, and done. Now I can return my response value. So this is done. Let's call this API from our Google Event API controller and see if we are able to create event or not. Public async task of event response and request. So we need to first inject our event service. Now this dot event service dot create event async, and we'll pass the event request, and done. So this is done. We just have to register our service. Builder dot services dot add scoped I event service to event service, and done. So we'll add the HTTP post and make it as event slash create, and let's run the application and see if it is working. So we'll add a debugger here and let's run. So to create the event, we just needed two of the properties as mentioned in the documentation. We needed only start and end time, but we'll also include the description and the summary. And in the time zone, if you see, we have to provide the time zone and we have to provide our date time. So we'll just go and create a event, and in this we'll just remove the date, and in this we will be adding the date as 29 and the time as 090000, and the time zone as Asia slash Kolkata, and it will be same for this. The time zone, the date time will be same, but I'll change the time to 10, and we'll remove this date. Summary as test summary, and description as test description. I don't need anything else, so I'll just remove all of them, and done. So let's try running the application. We got the debugger, got the response. Here we are able to create the event, and we have just created an event with this ID. So we'll copy this ID so that we can use this to check if the event we created, we can get it using our get call. So let's confirm this theme from our calendar. So this is my calendar, and we have this 9:15 to 10:15. So it is created. If you see, we have test description, test summary. We'll write the logic for getting the event now. So let's go to the documentation again. To get the event, what we need, we again need the authorization. Yes, we needed the calendar ID, we needed the event ID. So for the calendar ID, we will be using the primary, and the base URL is same. We just have to use the calendar ID and event ID. So we'll just use the copy paste method to write it fast. So this is my method, and where is my get by ID async? Calendar ID, and we already have the calendar ID. Events we have slash event ID slash event ID. Now we have to make a get call to this, and we have to add the token for sure. We have to add the header. So we'll just add the header. We don't need the body, we needed the token. And we'll make the get call. So get async, and we'll have to make the method as async method, and then we can return our response. Let's add it in our controller and check if it is working. Copy the same event slash event id. This event id I'll pass as parameter. Get event async. I'll pass the same here as well, and we'll pass the event id, and done. We'll keep a debugger here and let's try again. So I have already copied the event id, so I'll just copy from there. We'll paste it here and then see. Run. It hit the debugger. Let's debug. Get async, and we got the value. So this is the value for the event, and we have got all the properties here. Now we will be writing the API call for getting all the events. So we have to list. So just go to the list, and if we see we need authorization, we have to make the get call to calendar id slash events. And here we have the query parameter as always include email event types, max attendees, max results, order by pagination and stuff. We just needed the time max and time min for now. We'll try getting the events in a certain period of time. So let's use time min and time max property, and let's get all the events. This also the method will be sort of same, just we will have few extra properties. We don't need event id, we have this calendars slash calendar id slash events. Okay, now we have to get the token, add the header, and we have to get as a list. So list, we have few of the query parameters, so we'll use the min and max value. For that it's better if we get it from the parameter only. So min time, date time, max time. So this should be fine. Let's go and update in the iService as well. Now since these are the query parameter, we have to add the query parameters here. So request dot add query parameter. We have time min, which is of datetime format, so we'll just make it as min time dot to string, and same for the max. Time max, max time, and also we'll pass the time zone. We are using as ACS slash Kolkata. And this should be fine. Let's add the same in the controller as well. Class events, get events async. Here we have to get the min date and max date. So this is done. Here we have to change the type as list. It should work fine now. Let's try. So let's try the events. We'll get all the events within some specific date range 28 to 30, and let's try. We got the debugger and we have some exception. So let's try to debug it. We have the event service. We'll just go through the documentation once again. So time min and time max, the default values will be mandatory time zone offset. So this is required and this would be the format of. So we'll use the jet one so that can specify it's a UTC, and then we will use the YY MMM DD. Okay, so we haven't added that, so we'll just add it here. YYY MM DD, sorry, capital M, then DD, then T, and then our H, that means capital H, 24-hour format, MM, then second, and Z. So we'll copy the same in the time max as well. And what is the time zone used for? Used in the response. So we'll just remove the response for now and let's run it again. Now we will try it again now between 28 to 30 and execute. We have a breakpoint, continue, and we have the exception again. So what can be the exception now? Let's try removing the typecasting here from now, so that if our API call is working or not, we can get to know. And let's return some empty data. Let's try it 28 to 30. Let's add a breakpoint here so that we can see if our data is coming and if there is an issue in the typecasting. So we have got the data, but there is some issue in the typecasting. So let's see the property in the documentation. Okay, the property altogether is different. So that is the reason we are getting the issue with the typecasting. So I will create this model again. So we'll name it as, do we have pagination? Yes, so we'll name it as paged event. We can create in the same public class paged event response. And I have, let me see if I have it somewhere. Okay, so here we have default reminders. We need to create the model for that. And here it is. And we have another property in this. If you see kind, e-tag, summary description, updated time zone, and access to all default reminders, next page async, and now we have the items, which is event resource. So we can create list of event resource and name it as items, and it should be done. We just have to use this in getting the list of events. So instead of list, we'll just map it to paged event response, and let's return response, and here as well in the interface, and last in the controller. And it should work fine now. Let's try. So again, I will take the same date range, that is from 28 to 30. Continue. And we have got the response finally, and let's hit continue and see the response. Yes, we have one event, and it is the same event, test summary and test description. Okay, so we have done our create, get, and get by id. Let's do for the update, and then lastly we will do for the delete. So we need to implement the update, so let's go to the documentation again, update call. The authorization is required. We have to make the put call to this event slash event id. So it is just like this, and we have to add up to here. Now we need to make it as a simple, and in the parameter path parameter we have the calendar id. In the event id we are using primary in the calendar id, and we have already passed the event id. Now we have the optional query parameters which are mentioned below, and then we already have the authorization in place. And in this also we have the start and end time. So what we'll do is we'll just simply increase the time from 1 hour to 2 hours, and that should be fine. So let's make the put call, rest request dot add json object, and we'll pass the event request where response. So we'll see what response we are getting. If it is successful, it returns the event resource, so this is fine. Wait, this dot rest client dot put async, and we have to get the event response, and we'll pass a rest request, and we need to return this response, and done. So our update method is also done. Let's add it in the controller and check. Create the same event slash event id slash update, and we will pass the event id in the parameter and call this method as update event. And that's done. So let's try this API call as well. Run. And we need to update. I've already copied my event id, so we'll use that event id. I don't want to update anything else, I just have to update the date time. So I'll remove all those properties. I'll remove this date, just it will be date time, so 2024 29. If you remember, I have created from 9 to 10, so I'll make it as 9 to 11 now. Same date, it's 11, and it is Asia slash Kolkata. And let's check the debugger. Yes, it is added, and let's execute again. Here we have event id, get token, and we are making the request, and we have got the successful response, and we can see it is updated. Let's see in the calendar if it is updated or not. Go to the calendar, and you can see it is extended from 9 to 11 now. Since you are getting 9:15 to 11:15, because calendar time zone is configured for different location, that is why it is showing 15 minutes ahead. Now we'll create a method to delete the event. Let's check the API first. So delete, we have to make the delete request to this calendar slash calendar id slash event id, and in the calendar id we'll be using the primary, and we have to pass the event id, and we have the following query parameters. So Let's see. We will just go and it will be same as this request token authorization, and we have to make the delete call, and if it is successful it won't return anything. So that is it, and we have to make the delete call, delete async, and we don't need any typecasting because it won't return anything. So we are done with delete call as well. So let's go to the controller and copy this, make it as delete, delete event async, and we don't need this, we don't need return type, and we are done. We can add the debugger here and run the application again. I have already copied my event ID, and we'll try deleting the event. First, let's see, we have one on 29th from 9 to 11, and we'll now try deleting it. Delete, try it out, and then keep the ID, execute. We have got the debugger, F5, and done. So it should be now be removed from my calendar. Yes, there it is. So we have covered almost all the topics regarding creating, updating, deleting, and getting the events. So the things which are pending is how we can add the attendees, and also we have to see how we can add the Google Meet. So we'll cover both at a time. So let's go and check it out. So in the model, if you see in the event request, we have a property called attendees. Now, if we add the attendees, it will be done. But let's go and check the documentation of insert. So in the attendees property, we have additional guest, the comment, which is optional. Again, display name is optional. Email is required when adding attendees. So we'll be adding email and the name. But I don't want to use my personal email, so we'll be using a temporary email. So let's search for the temp email, and then here we go. It will generate us a temporary email, and we can use that email. Okay, so now let's go and create an event. But before this, I would also be adding the Google Meet. So if we go and check our documentation again at the time of insertion, we have this conference data version that is either 0 or 1. So 0 assumes no conference data supported and ignore conference data in the event body. Okay, but version 1 enable support of copying conference data as well as for creating new conference using the create request field of conference data. The default is 0, acceptable values are 0 or 1. So we will add the conference data version now. So at the time of creating event, let's go to event service and create event. We'll add a query parameter. So REST request dot add query parameter, and we'll add the conference version and we'll keep the value as 1. Now using this conference data version, it will copy the conference data using the create request. So let's go and check the conference data. So here we have the conference data. So this is the nested object and we'll be able to see the conference data here. Okay, it should be somewhere here. Okay, if it is not here, we can check it in the event resources. And in this, if you search for the conference data, you will be able to see we have the conference solution. Inside this, we have the key and the key type. And here we have the conference data dot create request. And in the create request, we have the solution key and the type. For this type, it should be Hangout for Google Meet. And we can provide the request ID. And status is not required, so we'll just use the minimal data as much as possible. So in this we have already added the conference data, and now we'll just run, and from the body we'll pass the create request. So let's go create event, try it. We will create for again tomorrow, and it is 29, same time 9 o'clock. This time we will be adding the participant and the conference data as well. So this we don't need. We needed summary, test summary to description, test description to, and other properties. Allow can add self, no. Attachment we don't need it. Here we go. Now attendees we have to add. So in the attendees I don't need ID, I don't need other properties. So let's add the name as well and remove all these properties. In the email I'll be adding the temporary email which we have here. So I'll copy, and here we will be getting the inbox data. So we will add the email and the name is temp email. Birthday properties I don't need. Color ID I do need this conference data. So for conference data, let's see what data we needed. We needed just the create request. We have these properties here, so we'll be adding the conference solution key type, and request ID and notes. Okay, so what is the solution key type? So type will be hangout meet. So let's keep hangout meet. Status we don't need. Request ID, we'll keep the request ID as some random key, and entry point we don't need conference solutions right now. So conference data dot create request would work fine. So we'll just remove this as well, and event type and all we don't need. We don't need other properties. So now we have already the participant and the conference data we have. So let's try it now. Let's add a debugger here, and it is already added. So let's execute. We have some error, notes signature and this stuff should be nullable. So let's go and make it nullable. So what are the properties that are throwing exception? We'll make them as nullable first. In conference data we have to make this property nullable. Okay, so we'll go to the models. We'll search for the conference. In the attendees also we'll have this. We just needed email, we don't needed any other properties, so we'll just make them nullable. And apart from that we have this conference data. In the create request we have conference key, which is fine. We are providing the value. We don't want this, we don't want this, we don't need this as well. And we have the request key, we don't need the status as well. So it should be fine now. So we have the conference attendees, conference data status. Yes, it should work now. So let's rerun the application. So we can now create the event, and let's execute again. The debugger hit, and now we can see if the event is being created. So we have some exception that it failed with the bad request. So let's see what is the issue. We have all the properties. Let's go to the documentation ones. So our conference data looks fine because we just have the create request, and the create request is having our solution key and its type, and the request ID status we don't need, it is the read only. So it is fine. Now we'll see the attendees ones. So attendees, additional guest, it's optional, comment is optional, display name is optional, email is required if we are attending the attendees, and if we have the profile ID then add it. Optional is again optional. Organizer is read only property, resource, and response status. Okay, so here if you see here also we have like possible values already present, so we need to add this property at the time of passing the data. So let's add it and then see if it is working fine. And since we don't know at the time we are creating the event, they need to take the action, either want to decline or accept or make it tentative. So let's create now and let's debug. So yeah, things are working fine now. So if you see, we have got the link as well. Okay, we have the Hangout link and we will be able to join now. Let's see the same in our Google Calendar. So let's go to the Google Calendar and here we have this event. And if you see, we have just small event. We have the join meeting link already present. We can join it. If you see, the link has EDF, KZDE, and SVD. So the same we have in here. So this is how we will be creating the event with Google Meet. Now we'll have the question like where should we store our token? So the token need to be stored in the database, and most of the cases the application will be on the profile label. So major thing that need to be kept in mind is the refresh token, which we have to preserve while refreshing the token. Few of the properties I just wanted to show you, like every time we are updating the events, right? So we have this property of send updates. So what it will do is whether to send notification about the creation of the new event. So at the time of creating event, it will send email notification that an event has been created for you. Similarly, for the update, we have the same property of send updates. So here we have like a guest who should receive the notification about the event update, and similarly we have for the delete as well. So it's like who should receive notification about deletion of the event. Please go through the documentation once, and please do not use the deprecated parameters. If you have any doubts or you are facing any of the issue while developing your project, you can reach out to me on my email or you can reach out to me on my Facebook page as well. So that's all for the video. I'll be providing the documentation link in the description below. Hope this video will help you. So that's it for the video. If you like it, please do like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.